The Blake mansion stood alone in the Connecticut countryside, a sprawling testament to wealth. Rooms full of priceless art, golden chandeliers, expensive furniture, and absolute silence. Edward Blake had built an empire, but he had lost everything that mattered. His wife died giving birth to their son, Liam, 7 years ago. The grief never healed. It only calcified into distance. Liam lived in a wheelchair, trapped not just by his body, but by his father's inability to connect. The boy didn't speak. He didn't play. He simply sat by the window, watching the world he wasn't part of, waiting for a father who rarely came home. 3 months ago, the diagnosis came: aggressive leukemia, advanced stage. The best doctors money could buy gave the same answer. There was nothing more they could do. Edward transformed part of the mansion into a medical facility. He hired nurses, purchased every available treatment, and then retreated to his office, unable to face the one thing his wealth couldn't fix. Liam grew quieter. His body weakened. The mansion became a tomb. Grace Johnson arrived on a cold morning with a small suitcase and no expectations. At 38, she had worked in many homes, always keeping distance, always staying invisible. She had her reasons. 3 years ago, she'd lost her daughter Emily to cancer. The pain had taught her not to attach, not to hope, not to feel. Grace's job was simple: clean the rooms, organize the house, avoid involvement. She would do it well and collect her paycheck. But the moment she saw Liam sitting motionless by the window, something shifted inside her. For days, she worked quietly around him, dusting shelves and folding linens. She didn't speak to him. She didn't expect acknowledgement. Yet she noticed that his eyes followed her movements with quiet curiosity. One afternoon, while she was folding sheets in the laundry room, Liam wheeled closer and silently handed her a drawing. It was crude but unmistakable: 2 figures holding hands under the sun. A woman and a child. Grace stared at the picture. Her hands trembled. The image reminded her of Emily, of everything she'd lost. She felt tears fall before she could stop them. Liam didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and wheeled away, leaving the drawing in her shaking hands. Something broke open inside Grace that day, a door she'd locked 3 years ago. After that drawing, Liam followed her everywhere, not demanding attention, just present. When she dropped something, he'd pass it to her. When she reached for a cloth, he'd extend his hand first. Grace began adjusting her pace to include him. When she folded clothes, she'd place items on his lap. When she organized books, she'd slide them for him to hand back. They developed a rhythm, unspoken but complete. One afternoon, as she picked up a toy, Liam rolled closer and quietly said, "Mommy." Grace froze. The word hit something ancient and broken inside her. She knelt down, wrapped her arms around him gently, and whispered, "It's okay." Edward passed by in the hallway. He stopped, watching them for a long moment. Something flickered in his expression: surprise, jealousy, confusion, before he walked away without speaking. But Grace didn't care what he thought. Not anymore. Grace began spending her free time with Liam. She read stories in the afternoons. She baked simple cakes. She played quiet games with puzzles and counting leaves in the garden. For the first time in years, Liam laughed. The sound was soft, but real. His appetite improved. His sleep deepened. The doctors noticed the change, though they credited his medical care. They didn't understand that he was healing not from medicine, but from being seen, from being loved. Edward observed from doorways and hallways. He saw his son smile, something Liam hadn't done in months. He saw the light return to his eyes, but Edward didn't know how to join this new world Grace had created. On Liam's 7th birthday, Grace woke early and baked a simple cake with 3 candles, just like in one of Liam's drawings. When she brought it to the living room, Liam's face transformed. Nurses gathered quietly. Edward stood in the background, watching. Grace encouraged Liam to make a wish. He looked at her with such tenderness, such clarity, and spoke words that would echo forever. "I just want to live 1 more year with Mommy Grace." The room fell silent. Grace immediately began to cry, not hiding it, not holding it back. She knelt down and embraced him, her tears falling freely. The nurses looked away, emotional. Edward's expression remained unreadable, but inside him, something shifted. He had seen what he could not provide. He had witnessed what his money couldn't buy, and it terrified him. That night, after Liam slept, Grace couldn't stop thinking about his words. 1 more year. As if he'd already accepted that years were running out. She made a decision that would change everything. Without telling anyone, Grace took medical tests at a clinic in town. She was searching for anything that might help. When the results came back days later, her hands shook opening the envelope. She was a compatible liver donor. A partial transplant could give Liam a real chance. But the second part of the report was devastating. Grace had a hidden heart condition. Donating would be extremely risky. The surgery might kill her. She sat in the clinic hallway for a long time, reading those words over and over. Then she closed the envelope and whispered, "Yes." Grace approached Edward in his office and placed the medical documents on his desk. She explained everything. Her research, the compatibility, the transplant possibility. Edward didn't even open the papers. "You're being dramatic," he said coldly. "You're trying to get attention using my son's illness. Medical decisions are in the hands of professionals, not house staff." His words were sharp, dismissive. Grace left the room with her heart broken but not defeated. The staff began whispering. Some said she was pretending to be a hero. Others called her delusional. Even the doctors dismissed her, saying unapproved surgeries were impossible. But Grace didn't stop. She couldn't. She consulted with her old friend Dr. Helena, an independent physician who confirmed everything. The transplant was medically possible, but the risk to Grace was extreme. Grace made her arrangements in secret. She visited the transplant center repeatedly, signed documents, and prepared her will. She left letters with a lawyer, one sealed instruction to be opened only if she didn't survive. She wrote to Liam, explaining that sometimes love means taking risks. She told him she would always be with him, no matter what happened. Liam had no idea what was coming. The operation was scheduled in secret at an independent hospital. Grace entered the surgical wing alone, while Liam was already under anesthesia in the adjacent room. Both operating rooms fell silent as the surgical teams began their work. For Liam, it went smoothly. His body accepted the new liver quickly. His vital signs remained strong. For Grace, everything went wrong. The hidden heart condition made everything harder. Her blood pressure dropped repeatedly. Her heart rate became unstable. By the time the liver portion was successfully harvested and transplanted into Liam's small body, Grace's heart was failing. The team applied every intervention, CPR, medications, a defibrillator used more than once. But her body couldn't fight anymore. The lead surgeon called time of death. The room fell silent. Some staff stood motionless, others quietly left. Grace had given everything she had. Hours later, Liam woke in recovery. A nurse gave him water. Then came his first question. "Where's Grace?" A doctor was called. Edward came to the recovery room, holding an envelope. He sat beside his son's bed and handed Liam the letter Grace had written. Liam opened it slowly and read her handwriting. Every word. She had written that he gave her a reason to live, and now she had given him a chance to keep living. Liam held the letter to his chest and hugged it like it contained his heart. Edward sat in the chair beside him. For the first time in 7 years, he cried. Not quietly, real tears that came from somewhere deep and long buried. He reached out and placed his hand on Liam's arm. They sat in silence, feeling everything that couldn't be said. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of meaning. Edward made a decision that day in the recovery room. The mansion, once a tomb of luxury and grief, would be transformed into something alive. Casa Grace, a support center for children with cancer and their families. Rooms that had held only silence now filled with laughter, activity, therapy sessions, and hope. Edward, once emotionally frozen, began showing up in Liam's rehabilitation sessions. He helped his son dress. He sat beside him during meals. He stayed close during every step of healing. Liam recovered slowly but steadily. 6 months later, he walked again using a walker, his legs weak but determined. He began drawing again, pictures of Grace with golden wings, standing beside him or watching from the sky. He called them his angel collection. He gave one drawing to every child he visited at nearby hospitals. "This is my heart, Mommy," he would tell them. "She saved me." Edward published Grace's letter in a small book distributed to schools. Her words about love, sacrifice, and courage now touched children who'd never met her. A scholarship fund was created in Grace's name for single mothers caring for seriously ill children. Donations poured in from across the city. The woman who arrived as invisible now lived everywhere, in Liam's voice when he spoke her name with pride, in Edward's presence beside his son, in the faces of children who felt less alone because of her story. On Liam's 8th birthday, he stood in front of a new cake, surrounded by friends, family, and children from Casa Grace. When asked to make a wish, he looked at his father and said clearly, "I want to live for me and for her." Edward stepped forward and wrapped his arms around his son. It was a long embrace, full of everything they'd both lost and everything they'd found. The room clapped softly. Several people wiped their eyes. That simple sentence contained everything: gratitude, purpose, and the knowledge that Grace wasn't gone. She was woven into every breath Liam took, every step he walked, every person he helped. Before bed each night, Liam placed Grace's photo on his nightstand and whispered, "Thank you." Edward stood quietly at the door, watching. He didn't interrupt. He knew those moments mattered. The mansion that once was silent with grief was now silent with reverence. The silence held memory, meaning, and love that refused to die. Grace had given her life to save one child, but her love had changed many. Every child who walked into Casa Grace, every student who read her letter in school, every person who learned what true sacrifice meant. She had given everything, and what she left behind couldn't be measured in years or money or medical outcomes. It lived in hearts, in actions, in purpose. Liam lived, not just for himself, but for the woman who loved him enough to risk everything. And through his life, she would never be forgotten.